So to head off some of the worries that people have already asked about, if you don't have your character done, that's okay. That just means you're kind of watching today. So what I would encourage you to do though is stop drawing and pay attention to this, because this is probably one of the more complicated lectures, like once we start getting into the node view. But I am recording it, so if you're kind of wanting to tinker and watch it later, that's cool. This is not something you absorb through osmosis though. This is something you absorb by rewinding it and watching it over and over again. So, I'm going to go ahead and open up my character, what I have of her so far.
Hey, Greg.
Yep.
Are you streaming it on Zoom?
I am, I think. Am I? Let's see. Yes, but so far, what is this? No, I want you all to be happy and live. But so far it's just me and Amy and somebody else. So, no, be happy. Like,
What just happened?
it's like somebody's name on the thing was very sad. If you're serious though, like, come talk to me. Like, that's, like, I don't.
Oh, you said sad. Sorry.
No. Okay, let me find the IGM faculty, Marlowe, second class, and so this is where I am right now. So our project, we have a week from today. We're working on it. So if you're at this point right now where you have a character and you want to work along with me, you can. If at any point you kind of get lost and stop, that's all right. It's also going to be a little bit, confusing in spots because your character is not going to be exactly like mine, right? So really what I'm going to be showing you is rigging tricks or rigging methods, and you're going to kind of have to figure out or work with me on which of those would be best for you. So, or for your character, or for that part of the character. So this is what I have so far. Her hair is kind of weak right now. I may sort of save that for last. I'm also going to show you a couple of alternate ways of rigging this, just so you can sort of see different, like I'll probably rig 2 different versions of the arm, just so you can see different ways of doing this. But what you'll notice is I have her broken up into multiple layers. And my original sketch, just kind of hidden now. I feel like that needs more. I need to add a little bit of extra leaves here, but that's something we're going to work on later. What I haven't really done is worked too much with the layer order, but you'll see that I have the body base, which is all this one piece, right? I have the mouth, I have the right eye and the right eyeball, the left eye and the left eyeball. I have the nose, which is a little bitty nub there. I am currently doing the arm as one piece and the leg as one piece, and then I have a foot and a hand for each of those. And the same for the left arm and the left leg as well. So you'll see left leg, same thing, and left foot, same thing. Now, yours may be varying degrees of this. You may have your character a little bit more to the side. You may have broken up your character's limbs into multiple pieces. And if you did, I want to sort of show you how to be able to do that too. But what I realized is I wanted my character to kind of have like rubber hose bendy arms. And so I've kind of made them all one piece, and then I've made the hand an individual piece. Anybody else need the tickets? There it is. Yeah. Okay. So, to be able to see what we're doing here, I'm going to go ahead and drag my node view over into this side panel. So I'm half node view, half illustration here, and then I can have my layers down here. First thing I'm going to do, highlight everything, click this button here just to kind of sort those out. So I don't know why it did that, but it put them all over here. For some reason my right node stayed here. Huh?
How do you drag the little node guy? You have to push like something?
You should just be able to click it and, was yours not doing that?
I mean, I don't have it open right now, but when I was doing the book, not my book, my pendulum, for whatever reason, when I clicked on it, it just wouldn't move.
Like one of the pieces or the whole thing in
One of the pieces, like I can move like the stringy things as little box.
There may be a way you've pinned it down.
I mean, it's fine. I was able to make it work, so it's not like it's a big deal. I was just curious.
Yeah, so yeah, if it's doing it again, let me know, because that may be like, I think that there are ways to lock stuff down. Okay. So, kind of looking at this sort of from the far away view, it lays it all out where we can see it, but it's not very cleanly organized. Like from way back here, I have no idea which one of those is my character's left eye, right? And so some of this is going to be a way that we can organize this. I actually use my node view as kind of a way to pick things at times. But what we're really going to be doing right now is sort of setting up our character into a controllable set of drawings, right? It's in an appropriate hierarchy. There's just all sorts of different things we can do in here, but we're going to set this up in a way that allows us to animate it probably even more efficiently than what you were able to animate the pendulum. Now, obviously, I'm just going to go ahead and extend all my frames out here just so we can see this. Out to about frame 100, I'll select everything in here, even my drawing at the bottom, and hit, sorry, let's do it all the way out here, hit F5. And that way I have this, or these drawings exposed all the way out to the end. Also, I'm going to uncheck this light just so I can always see my character no matter which of these I'm on. You can always turn that back on if you want to isolate whichever layer you have selected. All right. Okay, so again, just to kind of remember what we have in here, if I wanted, let's just try this here. I have my my left eye, right? If I wanted to move that, I first would have to get sort of my pivot where I want it to be, right? But if I lose, well, there's my left eye, left eyeball. So I'll move my left eye up to here, right? Now, if I wanted to move my left eye, you'll notice it leaves the left eyeball behind, right? And we kind of realized from last class that I could also sort of drag left eyeball on top of left eye and make it a child of that. But by doing that, like, we also start messing around with the sorting order and stuff. So just sort of as a refresher, one of the ways I can make this happen is if I choose left eye and click on the bottom of this and drag that into the top of this, you'll see that now I have that green connection, right, this green connecting line. So it's coming out of the bottom of left eye and going into the top of left eyeball. That means if I choose left eye, the left eyeball is going to go with it, and I can still manipulate the left eyeball. Now, there's a lot of things wrong with this, and this isn't actually my final answer. This is more of a way of reminding you how these hierarchies work and how I'm able to control these things. But these green lines connecting into the tops of this is how we're going to be able to create a parent-child relationship. Now, one of the things that's wrong with this is this eyeball can go outside of that, and that's just something we're going to deal with a little bit later. But I'm going to undo all of that, because that's not necessarily what I'm wanting to do just yet, right? I'm going to take a minute or two and just go through and sort of reposition all of my pivot points on this, just so I have them where I want them to be, because that's something I haven't done yet. So the stalk, and I'm going to be close on this, but not exact. I'm not, like, this isn't going to actually be the last time I have to do some of this. So just so I kind of have them all in there in the right place. And the reason for that is, if I move forward with some of the parenting stuff later, it's best to have this done ahead of time for that, because otherwise it will get a little confused about what you want it to do. So I'm just kind of going through and putting all of these in the pivot location where I would really like this to be. Now again, you can think about this in creative ways, right? Like if the only animation I ever think I'm going to do with her nose is sort of a nose like wiggle, like I Dream of a Genie like wiggle, I maybe would put the pivot point up there, because then my animation could just be that to get that wiggle, right? So it's kind of your call on that, on where you want to make some of these pivot points. The eyeballs, I've already done the left and left eye. The right eye, I'm going to actually not be controlling these with these objects, so I'm really just getting these close, because I can kind of group some of this stuff together later. Mouth, I'm going to put a little bit higher. Body is pretty important to me, because I want to put that where I think I would most likely like her to rotate from. So I'm going to put it kind of where I think that's going to be appropriate. Left hand. It's close already. Okay. Now, here's something else I'm going to do just for sort of cleanliness' sake. My original drawing down here, where I was, my original sketch of this, is still showing up here. Now, I don't necessarily want to delete it out of here, but I don't really want it showing up all the time. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the top of my composite node here, and I'm just going to unplug it. And so watch what happens when I release here. Watch what happens in my animation layers. Drawing just disappears. Now, it's still in my scene. I can still save it forever, and at any point, I can always plug it back in there wherever I want it to be, right? But right now, I just don't need it, so I'm just going to unplug it. So this should tell you a couple of things. This should tell you that these drawings are not just for display purposes, right? Like, it doesn't have to be something that is displayed in our scene in the final animation to be something that is usable, right? I could, if I wanted it to look like a shark takes a bite out of this character, right? I could just do a drawing in the shape of a bite. I could hide that from visibility and use that as a mask and turn that on and off to take a bite out of the character, right? So there's, I don't know why sharks are eating carrots, but bear with me. Thanks for the token laugh. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Okay, so just recognize that this is a thing. I can have these things in here. The points of these drawings isn't always just to be displayed. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and save this again, save a new version. I'm up to character 4. All right. Now, some of you may remember the pendulum, right? In our pendulum animation, actually, let's go ahead and open it so I can show you this really quick. recent open. Bless you. Is this the one I did? Yeah. So some of you may have remembered this in the pendulum. When I was animating, right, my ball here, I had that light turning on and off, right? Red to black, or red to a darker red, over and over again, right? And so you can see that happening because you can see the different exposures, the way the little gray bar is sliced into different sections, right? So you see those exposures. Okay, I was making sure I was actually recording. So you can see those exposures being chopped up there. But then on top of that, we also have our keyframes, right? The transition frames, the things that, like where we can add our rotates or where we can add our moves. That black dot with the black line, right? And so those are just right there on top of each other, kind of cluttery, right? Which means like that's okay until I'm like, you know what? I want to shift all of these keyframes down, right? But what happens when I do that is it also shifts all of my exposures down, right? So what I'm getting is sort of this cluttered input, right? What am I trying to manipulate there? Am I trying to manipulate the timing of the exposures or the timing of the keyframes? And so because of that, I'm actually just going to try to separate those two things in a way that's going to seem familiar to you all if you've done much rigging. I'm going to create a controller. And I'm going to do it in just sort of in the form of an empty node, right? So if I go back to file, open recent, if I can open character 4. So if we look here at all of our pieces, I want to be able to control them without having, but still be able to have like the exposures untampered with, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a parent peg. So let's just go ahead and do this kind of quickly with the that left eye and left eyeball, right? So I'm going to go ahead and grab those two. Actually, let's just sort of pull those out here to the side so we can see them a little bit, right? And so left eye, left eyeball. If I click on left eye, click here, and go to parent peg, then it's going to create this peg here. Now look what it did to in my animation layers. Now I have, so you can see it here. Now I have this left eye dash P, right? That is not a drawing. It's a different type of node, right? Over top of my character's left eye. Now it's got its own pivot point as well. But you'll notice that if I move this peg, the eye goes with it, right? The cool thing about this peg is if I wanted that peg to control the eyeball too, I could just do that. And now if I control that peg, both of those go with it. That means that my keyframes on that eye are being set on the peg, and that means if I need to do more drawings on that eyeball, which later I will, I'm going to have my character blink her eye, right? Then I'm not having to worry about the exposure timing overlapping with the keyframe timing. Does that make sense? Okay. So if it's still a little confusing, think of it in terms of the way we would create a controller inside of Maya, right? To do a rotation on an object or something. It's so that object, that controller object, is where all of your keys are stored, right? All of your keyframes are stored. But maybe you wanted the texture to change on the mesh, right? Like that's a separate layer that's happening on there, or separate facet to that animation. Okay, I'm going to undo this stuff because I'm really just showing you how those tools work right now. Now there is one element to this peg that is a little bit frustrating, but I'll show you how to deal with that in a minute. So don't go nuts creating pegs on everything. What I really usually do before I start animating is I start breaking up all of these nodes into some organization, right? So I got my left eye, left eyeball. Right? Sort of pull this over here, and then I can get my right eye, right eyeball. Get those up here. So now those are kind of organized in a way that I can kind of see them, right? I'll put my nose right below that because my nose usually is right below that, and then my mouth right below that. So now I can just sort of start laying this out in a way that even from back here, I can be like, oh, this must be the eye stuff, this must be the nose and the mouth, right? Now the entire body, sort of this central piece that everything is going to be connected to, maybe I'll put it there. So my left arm and left hand, I'll put those just a little bit higher. Something like this. And then this is my left leg and left foot. So really I'm just kind of organizing this where I kind of understand what's happening. This is right arm and right leg, right foot. And then this is the stalk. I'll go ahead and put it above the body. Right? And so this may not be super clear to you right now to be able to see this, but it's helpful for me to be able to kind of organize these things. That also means I can sort of grab these and move them around. What is this? Oh, I'm going to have to remember the name of that. Oh my goodness, what did I just do? Control Z. Okay. Now, trying to figure out what organization I might be needing for this as we go along. So I know I'm going to need some options for thinking about this. So just to make this clear for sort of instructional reasons, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and chop up this character's arm and do sort of a duplicate arm. So let's say for my right arm, there's a chance I'm going to need that to bend as a whole, or as a single piece, or as multiple pieces, similar to our pendulum, right? So I'm going to take that right arm, and I'm actually going to right-click on it here and say Duplicate Selected Layer. So now I have this right arm 1, and I'm just going to sort of pull this off to the side with the hand. We'll call this right up arm. And then I'm going to do this in a relatively clumsy way. I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this again. No, I'm not. I'm going to create a completely new layer. Drawing. We call this R arm low, or R up arm. Let's try R low arm. And that one's empty. Close. I do not need that keyframe on anything. What is that? So I got right up arm, my new one. I'll go ahead and move this up here. Now the way my right arm low right now, I'll go ahead and hide everything except for this, just so it's clear. Okay. So currently, right arm low has nothing in it. What I'm going to do is use I'm going to select everything on the right up arm, or maybe all right here, Control C, up here, Control V. So I have it in there. And I'm just going to erase from like here up on the low arm, and then on the up arm, I'm going to kind of overlap that a little bit. So it probably was too much, wasn't it? Was there, and there, down. And the point of that is I was really just trying to break these three pieces up here so you could see them, stack them in a different order. Sorry, give me one more second to go back and redo that. When I selected it, I didn't select my color layer. So, all that, Control C, V, and then on my low arm, I'll erase the upper part of the arm. And then on my up arm, erase the lower part. Okay. So each of these have their own pivot point. I'm going to go ahead and move those pivot points. So my up arm is in the right spot. My low arm is in the wrong spot. We'll go and put it here. And then my hand is in the correct spot. And so we saw earlier that, that what I can do for this if I wanted to, and this is not how I'm going to finally rig it, but I'll show you. Right arm, up arm, into low arm, and then right low arm into hand, right? And then that gives us the option to sort of rotate from this hierarchy like this, right? But like we had before, what you're seeing is we're getting the keyframes on those channels, right? So what I'm wanting to do instead is instead of using that to connect them, I want to create pegs. And those pegs are where I want to use those keyframes, right? And those are the things I want to connect together. Basically, what I'm really wanting to do is just be able to lock these three layers here to where I can't change them anymore accidentally. Right? And then all of my animation, all my keyframing is going to be on those pegs. So let's go ahead and create a peg. I'm going to click plus sign here with, I have one selected. Okay. Click this plus sign and create a parent peg. So it's also Shift P if you need it. Now, just to save you some heartache in the future, this peg by default when you create it is not correct. One of the things you'll notice is that peg that I just created, even though it's a parent of my up arm, its pivot point is over here, right? So I'm going to have to change the pivot points of those pegs. There's actually another thing that's even more detrimental about this peg that we need to talk about. So all of these things, though, are in the layer properties. So I'm going to turn on my layer properties. I'm going to hit this little plus sign here and go to layer properties. so I can see the properties of this peg. So the first one, with that pivot point being over here, of course I could manually move it to roughly the same location where my arm's pivot point is. But one of the other things I could do is under the Advanced tab, I think. Hold on one second. Okay, I'm gonna have to look that up. There is a way that you can tell it for, oh wait, I'm sorry. I know what I'm doing wrong. If I go to my right arm up, the child of that peg, I think it's under there. Yes. So on the right arm up, I can imply embedded pivot on drawing layer, but I can also click that drop down and say apply embedded pivot on parent peg. So if I click that, then now if I go up to my parent peg, well, that sucks. Since I've changed that, I actually have to change it on my up drawing. But you'll see if I change it on the drawing, now when I go up to the parent peg has the same pivot point. So that's a little bit of a workaround if you need those both to have the same pivot point. There's nothing that necessarily says you have to do that though, right? We can also just go ahead and leave this one on the drawing layer and then just manually position our pivot point on the peg. Right? Now, the thing that's going to be really frustrating about this later, and the reason we do all this now is because you don't want to start making hierarchies, changing those pivots, and then it's going to really mess up the way the pivot lines up with the drawing. However, there's one thing in this setting, or in these settings here, that will cause you problems after you animate. And so this is something to take note of. I've made this mistake many times, and I always have to come back and do it. So if you're going to use this peg method, and you want to be able to use the function editor later, you have to switch this position from 3D path to separate. So what that's going to do is it's going to create XYZ translate coordinates for that and rotation coordinates. 3D path is going to try to solve it with a different type of math function, something different than the way you're used to understanding translates and rotates. So that is one of the annoying things about a peg is that all of those things are set differently on it, right?
What type of animation did you say that you need to change that for?
Do I know? Oh, from 3D path under position to separate.
But you said if you wanted to use.
If you're going to use the function editor at all.
Okay.
So the function, it will still generate function curves. They just won't be Euler interpolation curves, which is the XYZ coordinates you're used to. I think it uses like quaternion or something like that. Quaternion, instead of using like the Cartesian coordinate system, it's using it's like speed and transformation and time or something like that. Quaternion has reasons for existing. You actually don't get that weird gimbal lock rotation thing if you're using quaternion. But in this case, like, it will make your function editor practically unusable if you use the 3D path option. So for me, that's a little annoying that I have to set so many different things on that parent peg. So I usually just make one, and then I duplicate that one over and over again, right? So once I've got all my settings on here, I need one for my up arm, I need one for my low arm, I need one for my hand, right? So I'm going to select that up arm, hit Control C, Control V. Now I have another one, Control V, I have another one, and I can just rename these, right? So this is now low arm. I would strongly recommend, low arm dash P. I would strongly recommend naming these because this is going to start getting confusing because we're going to have a lot of nodes in here. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that dash P on there so it so I can remember that this is the peg, even though I should be able to see them pretty well in here. Now I want each of these pegs, as you see here, my parent peg is controlling the up arm, right? And so what I want is for each of these pegs to control their respective drawings, right? So the low arm peg, I'll have control of the low arm drawing, and the hand peg, I'll have control of the hand drawing, right? So you kind of see what I have going there now is that if I choose low arm, and now I have to put my pivot point here, but you'll see that the low arm peg is controlling that drawing, and if I wanted to set keyframes on that, right, let's do low arm, I'll hit F6 for a keyframe, go down here, move it. You're seeing I'm getting those keyframes on here, and that means if I need to make changes to these drawings for, like, let's say there's a drawing where the muscle flexes, right? Where I want the arm to look like it's got like a trembling wave like pattern on it, right? I can still do that as a frame by frame animation here. Does that make sense? Okay. So I'm going to undo those keys. Go back here. Now, the way that I like to do this is think of the drawings as just these things that are along for the ride on the rig, right? I'm not going to do any parenting or any constraining directly with the drawings. Now that I have these pegs that are controlling them, of course I want to put the pivot points first. So make sure all of your pivot points are lined up, but now I have these pegs controlling them. I'm not going to have this drawing control this drawing, because if I do that, you'll see that it loses that other transformation connection. I'm going to have this peg control the lower pegs, right? So now the hierarchy is among the pegs, not among the drawings. And if I want to just go ahead and lock the drawings now, I won't even accidentally be able to set keyframes on that. What that means is if I wanted to say F5 here, or I'm sorry, F6 here on these pegs, go down here and rotate them all, right? Maybe choose just the hand, rotate it. I'm getting that rotation on those pegs and it's controlling it, and my drawings are still completely clean, right? If I wanted my hand halfway through this to change to a different pose where an index finger is pointing up or it's giving a thumbs up or something, peace sign, whatever, I can do a new drawing on that layer without having to worry about it getting tangled up in all of the keyframes. Is this making sense? Let me rephrase that question. What parts of this is confusing? Yes?
So, how do I do this question? Is it okay to have the arm already broken up into like 3 different bits before you place your pivots and your pegs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so I actually just broke mine up just now because I'm actually going to rig my arms and legs differently. I like having this option, but like what I get with this is a this sharp elbow bend, and what I was actually planning on doing in reality was sort of a softer like curve to the arm. And so we're going to do that with a different type of rig. Yes?
So when you're going into function editor, are you going to have to edit the pivot points, or do you edit drawings?
You edit in the function editor, where I've set the keyframes on the pegs, I'll be editing the curves for the pegs, not the drawings.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because hopefully the drawings won't have any curves on them.
So we're basically only using controls and not the drawings themselves.
Right. And what that does is it frees up those drawings to where now, where you did that frame by frame animation of the character jumping, you could do a full animation sequence of that on one of those drawings, and the peg will control the pivot point and location of that, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you would end up like where those edges don't meet?
Yes. So the question is like how those edges aren't meeting. So that's why I said I was doing this kind of quick and sloppy. I'll show you kind of on my foot what I've done for that. There are some more advanced tools for doing this as well. But let's turn all those on. If you look down here at my character's foot, let's do the right foot. What I've done is underneath the drawing, it looks like this, right? And so the reason that should help is if I turn this off where you can see it, the leg is over top, right? And then the foot is there. And so now when I rotate my foot, I should be able to keep some semblance of a cleaner line there, right? Now it's still getting a little bit of stuff there. There are some additional tricks we'll look at later. Right now, just for ease of use, like if we can get to it in the next little while here, I'll show you that too. But basically using those masks that I was talking about, I can have my lines masked out over the color. So like the parts of the line will still show up, but not the color channel. Does that make sense? So we can do that, but right now I'd say the easiest way is going to be try to get these to run together pretty smoothly. One of the ways you can do that is, you can see I kind of took my color over. And then the other thing, and this is one I didn't really go over too much, but your leg lines, or any of your lines, have some extra control function or features, right? So if you did this with the pencil, you're also able to control the thickness of that pencil line. So if I click on my contour editor here and go to pencil editor, you'll see that my pencil line, it's a line with a thickness to it, but you'll see that when I have the contour editor, or when I have the pencil editor turned on, it gives me these two dots on each side of it, right? And what that means is if I wanted to, I could go in here, hold down Shift, adjust the way this tapers. Right? And so I would say that really it's going to take a little bit of finagling that maybe is something you would even do after you're done rigging it to make that transition sort of cleaned a little bit more. But you can go in here and adjust this to where it feels like it lines up a little bit better with this. Does that make sense? So that's kind of the rough answer. There's also some masking stuff we can do here in a bit that will help that as well. So, yes?
Can you keyframe that?
The thickness of that line? I'm not going to say no, but not the way you're thinking. Not that I can just like hit F6 and it would work. What I could do is I could convert that into a shape, and I can keyframe the morphing of a shape. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it is possible. It's not as like one button click easy as you think. I don't think. There may be something hidden under here that you can turn that on. So. Okay, other questions?
So parent pegs for each of the groups that you made?
That's how well, parent pegs for each of the individual drawing hierarchies you want to create, right? So if you're wanting to create a hierarchy like we had in the pendulum, where the pendulum was all individual pieces broken up, and you want to build a hierarchy, the peg is the cleaner way of doing that. So Kitty and then...
If there's something that the character does that's behind them, like for Kate, do I have to make all of the lines that I Kate connect, or can I stop with Kate's the main character rather than draw the whole thing behind her? Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, it depends on if you ever want that cake to be flapping in a different way, right? To give you an idea of kind of what I mean there, I have this character right now set up to have her left arm just sort of stuck out here a little bit. There are going to be parts of the animation where this arm is completely like over here. You're not going to see it, right? So I think that usually what I do is I draw more than I think I'm going to need, just in case, because you don't want to need it later and not have it. Does that make sense? But if it's something you know is not going, like, I know that I'm not with this rig going to ever see where this connects into her head, because eventually what I'm going to do is this stalk is actually going to be behind the body. So I haven't really organized this part yet, but the stalk is going to be behind the body. So I'm not going to work too much on how that stalk is connecting into the head, because I know I'm never really going to have her lean forward and show the top of her head. If I'm going to do that, I'm going to be doing that with like some sort of frame-by-frame animation anyway, so I'm not going to worry about that. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So I did all this with this broken apart arm just to kind of show you how that should work. Again, this is just about like connecting with these green lines allows me to just think about the hierarchy of those, where these blue lines allow me to think about the sorting order of those, right? So right now the hand is actually on top, and I don't really want that. I want the hand to be kind of behind, like that, right? So I can always change these around to get different results. Hopefully will be better, or maybe will be worse. We'll see. So despite all of that that I just created, I don't actually want to use that arm, so I'm actually going to disconnect all of that. I'll go ahead and keep it over here later, in case I need it later anyway. But right now, that was that little FK arm we just created, and I don't really need it for the rig that I'm wanting to make. I want to remember something, and I can't remember what it's called. Give me 1 second to Google some stuff. So, did you have a question as well?
Yeah, but I answered it, so.
Okay. Other questions, other things that you're kind of confused on this? Yes?
Do we need to do the parent peg thing, and if we do, or if we should, if we need to do it, or if we should do it, what layer should we do it for, and what layer shouldn't we do it for? As opposed to just like using, like, keyframing the layers themselves.
So, when I'm making something that I know I'm going to be using for more than, that I know that I'm going to be using for more than just like a short, like, I have 2 seconds of animation, I'm going to actually, I'm just going to key that really quick, then I don't always worry about it. If I know I'm going to be using this character for like a whole acting sequence or anything, I don't ever set keyframes on drawings at all. The only real reason I showed you that in the pendulum is because I wanted to kind of take it in baby steps of kind of understanding it, right? The PEG system is just going to keep all of your animation data cleaner. So I use it for everything. And what that allows me to do is if I want to go back in there and do anything to the drawing, including completely redraw it, I can. So you don't have to, but I think it makes your animation life easier. This is a little different than in Maya, because I think as you saw from like the first project, like you can solve an animation in multiple ways, and there's always the brute force way of I'm going to redraw every frame, right? And for short little challenges, that might just be the way to go. To me, this is if I'm planning on animating a whole 2-minute movie with this character, I'm going to rig it in a way that allows me to get the animation done quickly without having to fight with it. And the pegs just keep you from having to fight with it. So, give me one second. I think I found what I'm looking for, but I can't. Backdrops. That's what I'm looking for. Adding a backdrop. So, you're seeing me solve problems in real time here. I could not remember what this was called, but there is an option in here to create something called a backdrop. So I can't remember how to make it, so I'm going to go to my help and find out. So let's say F1. What's this? Help. Okay, actually this worked. So I just looked it up on the phone. So what I'm looking for is called a backdrop. I have all this organized, right, or sort of clumped together, but that doesn't mean that, oh, you know what? I needed that hand. Let me bring that hand back, or at least Control C, Control V, and bring a copy of that hand back. And yeah. So, okay. So what I'm looking for is a backdrop to sort of group all of these together so I don't have to constantly go in here and move them one at a time. So this is all of my character's face, right? So if I right click and go to insert, where I said it was, give me 1 second here. I see backdrop. Oh, sorry. It's from the node view menu. Insert backdrop. So I thought there was a shortcut key for this, but we can click these little 3 lines up here. If I select this group, click here, insert backdrop, it's going to create this little box around all of my nodes. And the cool thing about that box is if I grab that box and move it, anything that's within it will go with it. Now, if I want to move the mouth out of here, and then I click that box and move it, the mouth doesn't go. If I want to move the mouth back into it, I can. And so what this is going to do is this is going to allow me to organize my scene a little bit easier. So backdrop. This is the body, so that. Now, all this is not actually doing anything to the hierarchy or anything like that. This is just allowing me to organize what my node view looks like quickly. And this is actually really powerful because if I want one backdrop within another, I can do that. Like I can have, I'll do that. There. So this corner down here, yeah, okay, I can resize that. Move this backdrop over here. And get that mouth and nose in there. And so now what I have is, I probably did that the wrong way around. I can do my entire character's head here can go inside of the body background, right? So is that making sense? It's like a way I can just kind of organize this stuff to see it. You can also go in here and pretty quickly change the colors of stuff. So if you want all of your arms, or all of your right side to be this purple color, all of your left side to be green. It's just whatever ways help you kind of organize your thoughts and your scene. Okay. So this is helpful for me because I can then just sort of quickly see from a distance what it is I need. If I have other stuff clustered, I can group those and move those off to the side. But it'll allow me to shift stuff around in here if stuff starts getting kind of tangled up. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. File, save as new version. I'm an obsessive saver. Okay. Questions? Because we're getting ready to jump into something new. Yes?
How do you choose the color backgrounds?
Oh, if you click the little, so if you already created one with insert, you just click this little yellow button right here. You can also name them if you wanted to. I can call this body, but you can choose a drop-down color from here that allows you to change its overall color. Hmm? Because it looks like it was on this one. No, I get that all the time where it tries to open something on the wrong screen. So again, all of this is just for organization, but organization is very important. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and say, I already saved this, didn't I?
Yes.
Save it again. I'm going to create a new file just to show you some stuff. We're going to call this Scratch, because I'm going to throw this away. Create. Okay. All right. I'm just going to kind of minimize this node view for right now. We'll bring it back later. And I'm just going to make a thing really quick. Rectangle, elongated. I'll fill that with red, and then I'll tone down that red because that's hurting my eyes. There we go. Okay, this is one piece, right? This is one layer, one node, right? But there are going to be times where I want to be able to rig this as well, right? So think of our character's arms, our character's legs. I have the option that I could go in there and break this one piece up into a whole bunch of other layers and put that together in a hierarchy, but that's still not going to give me that rubber hose look, right? It's just going to give me this little faceted, broken down version of that. So what I want for this is a deformer, okay? And that's where That's where rigging is going to get a little bit more complicated. Okay? So we haven't deformed anything yet, right? We haven't changed the shape of our layer. We've just been changing the translations or the rotations or the scales of those layers. What a deformer is going to do is it's like a warping tool or a warping mechanism that I can put on top of my layer that'll allow me to kind of bend it around and change the shape of it, or change the shape of the drawings that are on it, right? So let me show you a couple of the layers, or a couple of the deforming tools. First thing, we have our drawing on here. We'll call this bar. So it's under this right here, my rigging tools. So again, this is kind of frustrating because like it sounds like we haven't been rigging yet. Like if those are the rigging tools, what have we been doing for the last 2 days? Right, we have been creating a control rig. I think these would be more properly considered deformation tools. So if I click on that, I want to be in my Tools Properties menu right here. And you'll see that I have a couple of different options here. Right? The first one right here, if it's highlighted, this is called automatic mode. Really what this is going to do is I'm going to start creating a deformer, and Harmony is going to say, I think this is the best one for you to use, and it's going to create the type that it wants me to have. Well, that's cool and all, but I like making my own decisions. Let me select this object first here. Yeah, go back to that deformer. So I don't really want to use that kind. I would rather use one of these. I want to have a little bit more control over this, like choosing what I want it to be. So the kind of deformers we have are bone and articulation deformers, curve deformers, and then we also have one that's called an envelope or an envelope deformer. Now, on top of that, we have one more over here that looks like a video game controller. That's called a game bone. So, without getting into this too deeply, if you were creating 2D animation for a video game, right? One of the easiest ways of doing that is just frame by frame animation, right? You're exporting out a sequence of frames, whether you rig that in here or not, into a video game, and whenever you hit the jump button or the run button on the video game, it just plays that sequence of images, right? But some interactions in video games require more detail than that, right? So like if you need your character to aim a gun, like you can't draw every possible frame of that. And what if they needed to aim the gun while they were running, right? And you wanted that gun to be able to change directions while they're running. So for those things, we're able to create basically hierarchy structures that we could put into a game engine that still kind of control all of our layers the same way we're controlling it with those pegs, right? So basically it's pegs that export, right? We're not going to worry about those in this class. Like those are really cool, but really to get the best usage of them, you need a programmer that you can hand them to who can turn them into something cool in Unreal or Unity or whatever, right? And we're just not getting into that. So the three we're going to look at are these three here. The first one is the bone and articulation mode. So let's click that one so we can just see specifically what it does. Now on our bar layer, you'll see I have like this little dot with another dot in it. So I'm just going to start clicking. I'll click one point here. Try it again. And you'll see it gives me a little dot. If I go out here a little further and click again, get a line. I can kind of position it where I want it. When I release it, I get another dot. You'll see that kind of changes shapes. The bone tool doesn't make sense until you really click the third dot. When you click the third one, I start getting these shapes here, right? So I got these 3 points, and I have this shape that I can sort of change a fall off radius. So don't worry about that too much. Really, I'm just going to click through here a few times, and I have these points here. Whenever I'm done, I can just sort of go out of this. Like, I can go back to my move tool. But really, to control these deformers, we're going to use yet again another type of move tool, which is this little box right here. Really what this box is doing is, it's kind of doing the same thing that the move and the rotate tools are doing. It just works for more types of objects. So I'm going to click this little box here, and this will allow me to manipulate these elements of my bone tool. And so you'll see what I can do is I can grab it and I can start warping it. And it is like of itself a hierarchy. Now you'll also notice that these are editable. I can scale those up and down, and I can kind of soften how much of that curve I get. And so I'm able to kind of turn that stiff shape into a deformable thing here, right? Now, again, what I'm actually deforming, and this is important to recognize, is a vector shape. And so I can break that. You're going to start to see some of that, like where I'm getting some of this overlap on these two circles. I'm getting some weird crossovers there. So I kind of have to be careful with how much of this fall off I use. Now at any point, maybe I created this wrong. At any point, I'm like, you know what? I need to go back to that tool and fix it. If I go back to my deformer tool, you'll see it's still here, and my object snaps back, and I can kind of adjust these as like their standard fall off. And then when I turn that back off, or when I click my move tool again, it will go back to here. Right? So again, I have to be kind of careful with these. Yes?
So, does the deformer bar layer act as like a peg, so you can edit that on a keyframe?
This right here?
Yeah.
So, this is where it gets a little bit more confusing. What the deformer bar layer is acting as is a group for an entirely other node system. So right now my deformation bar is a node, and if I moved this part right here, right, that's like moving a peg around. So I can move that, or I could even, I think I can rotate that. But the problem with that is, let's say I had something parented to the end of this, right, or something like a hand at the end of this bar. The thing that will be controlling it is this piece, not this piece. Does that make sense? So my hand would just be floating over here in space while this arm is moving around. So the reason for that is if I double click on this, or if I click this little arrow right here, you'll see that what I really have is embedded in this, if I click back up where you can do it, embedded in this deformation is a little mini node editor. Right? And that little mini node editor is a hierarchy of each of those 4 bones that I just created, and then an out for those bones. Okay? So I know that sounds confusing. We'll use that later. Don't sweat it too much. What I'm actually going to do is undo all of that until I get back to before I created the deformer, if it'll let me, and show you some of the other deformers. Yes?
I'll just real quick before you jump on something else. So like if you want to use that for like a character's arms or sway while they're walking or whatever, you could keyframe it to specific like beats.
You can. So what we're going to do is basically what we have to have is another node that says interpret all of this deformation, find that end node, and apply those transforms to whatever the child is.
Okay.
So basically, it's just an extra step other than just parenting it underneath it. So yeah, I'll show you all that here in just a minute. Because that's actually how I'm going to do my character's arms and legs and that stalk and the face. Okay, so one more deformer to look at. Let's go ahead and do 2 of them. So we got a curve mode. So curve mode, let me undo one more time. Curve mode, I click the first node and start dragging, right? And I drag toward where I anticipate I'm going to be putting my second one, right? So I've just got one there. If I go out here and drag and start pointing it back toward the first, really what I've just created there is 2 tangent handles, 2 Bezier handles, right? So whenever I'm ready to start manipulating this, I go to my move tool, and I have this point that I'm moving, and then I have this Bezier handle that I can curve, right? Again, this is still another mini hierarchy. So if you go to my deformation bar, it's just a mini hierarchy with 2 nodes instead of 4. Yes?
Are there any way to add restraints so that way you're not like overstretching
You mean like a pin for it to where it's like
I guess kind of like the IK handle stuff because you can easily
like stretch beyond what you would
Yeah.
want it to? Probably. I'm sure that there are some things within the nodes that you may be able to use to do that. Like you can lock it within certain ranges and stuff. Usually it's just kind of eyeballing it though. Like, one of the cool things about 2D is sometimes you can break it a little bit more than 3D on purpose, right? Like you can use that to your advantage. So again, it's worth noting, I'm setting these keyframes on this deformation, on my deformation bar, not on the actual drawing itself, right? Okay, undo that a few more times. I want to show you one more deformer, which is this one right here, the envelope deformer. Now the envelope deformer is more of like a warp tool, right, in Photoshop or something like that. So the envelope deformer, if I remember it correctly, let me select my object. The envelope deformer allows me to sort of go through here. I haven't actually used this one a ton. And start creating sort of an actual encasement for my object, right? Here. So I think now I can go to this, and what I get is sort of a wrap for this, right? It's like a way of warping this shape. Right, so if you wanted to get some squash and stretch on your character's face, this is maybe how you could squash it, is with these points. So is that making sense? Now, it's even more complicated in here because it's basically a curve that manipulates everything that is sort of enclosed around it. Right? It's an influence shape. Okay. I feel like I'm throwing a lot at you all right now. Does this feel like a lot? Yeah, it does. All right. Well, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and try to finish rigging my carrot character using these tools, right? It's recording, so hopefully you all can kind of go back and watch through it. But I think we're going to end up extending the deadline on that walk cycle, because really after I get the deformers in there, I'm going to stop. There's still some more stuff I'd like to do. I'd like to be able to put some animation on the eyes, or some rigging on the eyes and the mouth. Maybe play around with a little bit of different hierarchy on that stalk, or just change the stalk. But I'm just going to go ahead and rig one arm, one leg, and the torso, and just sort of show you how that's working. And then we're going to stop, and you can kind of be fighting with yours. Now, what I will say to do is save often, right? Before you start rigging anything, save a version of this that you can go back to if everything goes haywire, right? Save multiple versions of this, because like every rig I've ever made, I usually end up making parts of it more than once, right? Some rigs I've gone all the way back to scratch and just remade the entire rig. Usually by the time you get done making the rig, you see so many different ways that you could have made it better. And if you have time at that point, you can always go back and rework it, right? So let's go ahead and close this. Yes?
What would the envelope want to be good for?
I think the envelope is good for, I maybe want to use it on parts of a shape to sort of show you. But so imagine we have our eye all rigged up, right? But we wanted to be able to get our eyes to do like a big, like, they sort of bug out into like a big like teardrop shape when the character's scared, right? then I can just create an envelope around that to deform it. It would probably also work for, let's say let's say you have kind of a round, like bubbly character, and you're wanting the head to kind of squish a little bit while it walks. You want to be able to rotate it and all that stuff, but also you want to just be able to add a little bit of squash and stretch to the head. You can just sort of wrap it in that, and then just sort of animate sort of those. It's kind of like it's going to overall, or change the overall shape of a more complicated object.
Can you use the envelope and one of the other ones together? So like if you have it walking and stuff, but you still need to move it in the head, can you put the envelope one on top of it to give it the squash while it's walking? Like what you just said? Or do you have to do the head separate?
You would probably have to do the head separate. Like my character, her head is all part of her body, and so I could use like one of the bone deformers to get like a sort of a spine and a head motion on that. I don't think I can add a shape deformer or an envelope deformer on top of that to get like a squash and stretch on her head or something like that. There are other deformers we can add to that, but really for that, if I wanted to do that, I would probably do a frame by frame animation of that. And there's some tricks to that too. I could use a deformer to generate a frame by frame animation and then rig that layer that has that frame by frame animation on it. That makes sense? Yes.
So if you create a rig completely into a project, how easy is it for you to take that and export it into another project? If you're going to use the same character rig for two different scenes, could you just like take the whole rig and drop it in like into Maya, or would you have to build it again? I think that you can just take the whole thing into a new project. So the problem with it is the rig is composed of all of these drawings, which are saved in your it's not your images folder, but it's your whatever. Source images.
Yeah. What is that one called? Let me find it really quick. Elements. So it's all the things that are saved in your elements folder. Your actual X stage, and then your palettes are your colors. Really, what I would do is I would probably have a master. Like the hard part would be taking these elements out of this project folder and getting them to transition smoothly into another project folder. But it is doable, and I think it's doable through the library. So I think what you can do is, and I haven't used this a lot, so really what I would say is to sort of think of this as your project here, like mine's just called character, but think of that as the entire project folder. So if you have multiple animations, they would all live in that project folder, and you would just have all of the elements in there. And I think that would be the right way to think of it. So, somebody else have a question? I feel like I saw another hand up. Okay, I know this is getting confusing. It's worth it. I promise. Like it really does. It gives you the option to create a lot of animation really quickly. I think we are probably going to change some of our due dates on this project, and maybe push it back just to give me a little bit more time to talk to you about some rigging and answer any of your questions next, like on Monday, and then that way we can use Wednesday to do some of the animation. But like once we get this character rigged, the animation like will be like less than an hour for a walk cycle, and then like you can do. I mean, this is the rigging that characters in what's that Loud House. Like this is a very similar rig to what all of those characters are made with. So I'm going to go ahead and save this here. I'm going to go ahead and rig up the torso first, and I'm going to rig that with one of the deformers. But before I do that, I'm going to I'm going to go ahead and create a peg for this. I know it doesn't seem like I need one, but I just want to be able to move the entire character. So I will select the body. I'll go ahead and create a parent peg. My parent peg went way down there for some reason. I'll move that up here, and so that's the body peg. Now I'm going to try one more other thing too. I'm going to before I duplicate it, I'm going to go ahead and go to my layer properties. I'm going to make sure to set that to separate. And then I'm going to go ahead and move my pivot point for the body peg to somewhere like this. Right? Now, just while I am thinking about it, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this parent peg. Control C, Control V. I'll make one for the stalk as well. Go ahead and move that up to there. And that in. And I recognize that there may be things that kind of get in between this with the deformers, and that's okay. These are just there for me to kind of recognize. I'm going to paste one more of these outside of here, and I'm going to call this one character -p. Now the reason I'm making this one is because everything in this entire rig is going to be parented underneath that eventually, and that should allow me to scale my entire character, rotate my entire character, move my entire character around. It's sort of a master control. That's so handy that sometimes I'll create two of them on top of each other, so I could have like even extra controls for that. Yes.
So is it the same thing as in Maya, where you have like the central control that
Yeah.
moves the character?
That placement control, yeah, and that's what I'm going to use this for, just so I have one. And just while I'm thinking about it, I just went ahead and created it. I'll put it down here next to my character's feet, because more than likely that's what I would use it for. I can do my character walking in place, and then I can just slide the character across the screen at whatever speed I need them to. Okay, so that's just a placeholder one out there. I'll bring that back later. So, start with the body. I'm going to go ahead and create a deformer on this. In fact, I may go ahead and let's see what happens when I leave it plugged in. So I'm going to go ahead and select the body. I'm going to create a deformer, and then Tools, Properties. I'm going to use this bone articulation deformer. So I'm going to start sort of low near where the body peg was, maybe not right on it. So start right there. And I'm just going to go through and click a few spots just to give me some bend points. I'll go ahead and go all the way up to here. Okay. Now, something you do kind of have to be careful with. Move this out a little bit more like this. Something you have to be careful with is not accidentally setting keyframes on it. See how I just did that? I shouldn't have done that. So if I want to move something and not set keyframes on it, I just have to turn off this little character here. So I'm going to turn animate off. That means I can move this stuff around, and it's not going to set any keyframes on this. And then when I turn it back on, it should be fine. Now, if I want to see how this deformation works, I'm just going to click here. Again, sort of start moving this around and seeing what I'm getting out of it. That's not bad. Let's undo some of that. Go back into the Tools editing mode. Sort of scale these up just a little bit. I don't want to get too much on there, but huh?
I like the better drive for like off her body. Yeah. It's a look.
So, okay. So whenever I want to, so this works pretty cool, right? Like you'll notice that I have this peg here, right? And if I move the peg, the entire deformer and the character goes with it. Awesome. That's what I wanted, because now if I wanted to pose this character's, body moving, I can do stuff like this, right? That works great, right? Except for if I also wanted the stalk to follow the end of her head, right? So if I just had body connected into stalk, right? When I go to move this, like the stalk still doesn't follow along, right? If I instead had deformation body going into stalk, I did not expect that to work. Heck yeah, that was easy. Except for that. So now when I need to rotate the stalk, it's kind of offset there a little bit, right? So the rotation of that is still there. So actually, that was a better result than I expected, but I want to still unplug this, because I think what I need is something called a kinematic output. Yeah, I know. Like there's so many new words to learn. So I have all of my node view here. Let's talk kind of briefly. I want to go ahead and add my node library right here, so we can kind of scale these up. These are all of the different nodes that I can use. So obviously we have these pegs, like we used that earlier. We talked about like the blur and the color corrects and stuff like that. And if I go to deformation, the one I'm looking for is this. Can't see it. Yes, it's that one. Is this one right here? It's got it's weird looking. It's got like a little bone with a wire into it, and then like some primitive shapes with a little line into it. It's called kinematic output, right? So basically what this is going to do is say, it's going to calculate all of those deformations on the joint, find out the end point of that deformation, the end point of where my character's head is, and it's going to let that be the parent to this peg, right? That output number is the thing that's going to change the location of it. So if I click this kinematic output and just sort of drag it over here where I have one, what I have to do now is map deformation body into kinematic output, and then kinematic output into stalk. So what that means now is that if I go back here, I can move my entire character's body, right? I know the face is still missing. I can go in here and I can pose this however I want to, right? And then whenever I'm ready to start animating on that stalk, if I go to the stalk peg right there, my pivot point is still in the right spot, right? So that is a very important element of this, right? Because I'm going to do the same thing with my character's arms and my character's face, right? This kinematic output from the body, I want it to affect sort of the location of these arms. I believe this is going to work. Please let this work. Sort of stretch this out a little bit where we can see this a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate my character peg up here. So Control C, Control V. I want to go over here and put this over my character's arm and hand. So do this as R arm peg. Right. And then Control V, R hand peg. Right. Again, I'm going to want to line these up in a in terms of their pivot points. Right. So my pivot point for R hand, I'll put it right up there. Just to fix this really quick, I want R hand to be behind the arm. And then our arm, pivot point for that, here. So, from my kinematic output over here, I'm going to map that into our arm. And then, of course, I want my R arm to also be controlling my R hand. So I believe, hopefully, that means that if I manipulate my character, arm is going with it. That's not really what I want. Okay. So I think I know how I'm going to fix that pretty easily. It's not super easily. Basically, I have to recreate this deformer. I think I'm going to break it up into two deformers, one that stops right here, and then one that starts right there. And then I'll hook those together with two kinematic outputs. So I think. Let me go ahead and save this just in case. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete this deformer. I know that seems like I messed up a lot of stuff. Oh crap, we're getting close to the end of class, aren't we? So I'll pick that back up next class period. I don't want to beat that too much. Well, let me go ahead and try it really quick to see if this works. Click, 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 click. The torso. There we go. And then I want to make another one. Click. Yeah. Okay, I think that worked. Maybe. Okay, I'll finish this up next class period. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and stop there. I know y'all have lots of questions. It's all right, so do I. I think I know the answer to this. I just don't want to sit here and try to fight with it. Okay. Till next time.